Hi, everyone. Well, thanks for coming to our class. It is with Dr. Griffer, and she is here to talk about journeys and how we've all been experienced COVID. So I'm going to give the floor to her, and she'll give you more about her intro. I know she has a fun fact for everyone, and then we'll get started. So we've got lots of them. So I'm going to hide myself, and I'll be here. So I'll let you have the stage for. There you go.
Oh, she had herself before I finished hearing what she had to say, but okay. Hello, I am still learning the demo, so if I've done something strange or you can't hear me or I pushed a wrong button and now like I've turned into a cat or something, let me know because I'm learning this. I'm here today because let me see. I gotta do my share my screen. Do. There we are. There's a thumbs up button someplace. There we go. Okay, so I am here because I want to have a chance to speak about what some of us have been going through. It's been kind of a journey in this last year, and it's almost a whole year at this point that we've been living through what's happening in the community around us with COVID. And it's really important that we are working together and doing what we can to sort of make it through, because this is not easy for any of us to navigate at this point. So what I've been asked to do is come in and chitter chat on a couple of different topics. So the first one is the one we're going to start with today. It's sort of an introduction and staying connected. This is a community-based, and I thought this would be a great place to start because here we are doing some community-based connection. So we start here today. We will be working through grieving our normal. On the 10th, we're going to have the opportunity to come together and discuss sort of what kinds of things we miss, what kinds of things we wish we still had available to us, and how to manage some of those changes and some of those desires a little bit better, share some ideas with each other, or just commiserate that this is the way it is for a little while and it's tricky. On the 17th, we are going to be talking about growing with our families. That's either our immediate families or our extended families, or people that might as well be our families that we've known for our entire lives. How to maintain connections and how we're handling the changes in the last year in those relationships. The 24th, we're going to do caring for our bodies, and that's sort of physical exhaustion and lack of exercise, because a lot of the things we used to do are either still closed or just opening up again. So we're hoping to sort of jumpstart that process of making sure we're caring for ourselves. And then on the 31st, we are looking at nurturing friendships. So these are specifically relationships that we want to be able to grow in our lives that we're finding a little bit challenging to do in this environment where, only two households can get together sometimes, and restaurants aren't as available as they used to be, and a lot of other activities have closed down. What are we doing? What kind of differences and challenges are we running into? And what can we do to better protect and develop those friendships that we have? So that's what I've been asked, and I'm going to do that. I'm here. Why anyone would ask me to do these things is beyond me, but this is the obligatory page of stuff that I do and who I am. So I am Dr. Beverly Griffer. Beverly works for those people hollering at me in the streets. I have my PhD in clinical psychology. My concentrations are in forensics, which is sort of courtroom and sort of abuse, neglect related, and neuropsychology. So that's the way our brains work. I am also an attorney. I have a Juris Doctorate focused on criminal and appellate practice. which I used in juvenile work and things of that nature. I have an MBA in legal and financial compliance, which is HIPAA laws for mental and medical health care and things of that nature. And then my first degree was in experimental psychology, which helped me kick this train rolling. So right now I have a number of things that I do, and all of them are related to this and have seen different areas of our lives be affected by this COVID situation. So first, I'm doing therapy work. I work with Arbor Mountain Therapy and Assessment. It is a part of a nonprofit that the Research Institute for Forensic Neuropsychology. We are the treatment branch of that project, and we do teletherapy right now. We work with families, we work with individuals in all kinds of different circumstances, and I do therapy work through them. I also still practice as an attorney on some matters. My information is here. Our office primarily does family and probate work, but we do some business work as well. So it's like estate planning and, family parenting time schedules and things like that. And then I teach family law and policy at the graduate level at Concordia University. I have a good time with that. So apparently all of this stuff made people think that I would be a reasonable human to ask to have this chat with you, and I'm glad. Yep, we're gonna talk about people coming in to say hi as we sort of move forward. That's a really good question. And then let's see. I don't know if you're watching live or you're not watching live. Some of y'all are wondering where you know me from. I'm Jody's wife. I think that you met my husband once or twice. He works at the center. We live right down the road from the OG. My kids are outside all summer through downtown. I am chasing them as they are catching Pokemon, and they are frequently huffing and puffing on their way to the dairy barn, and I am dragging their bicycles up the hills. So if you see me, give me a holler. But if you're sitting here trying to wonder, where do I know her from? That's where you know me from. So one of the things that we have to look at is this isn't a normal illness. This is not a normal illness. It's not a normal situation that we're going through. This has changed what the entire country is doing for a year now, right? We've been in this strange state of flux where the rules are changing. At least in our state, every 2 weeks, the governor is making changes to what we can and cannot do. We don't have a lot of control over that. Private businesses are having to make further decisions about whether they want to or how they're going to try to meet the requirements that the governor has put in place. There are federal rules that are shutting things down. And we're not entirely sure when we're going to move out of this space. And what this has done is it has turned this pandemic into something that we would call a collective trauma. So a collective trauma doesn't necessarily have to be something awful and terrible that destroys everything at once. A collective trauma can take time and take incrementally. So when we look at what that is, it's a psychological injury, meaning an injury not to our physical body, but to like our emotional well-being, or upheaval, right? Like everything is really chaotic, which is common to a group of people that experience the same event. Well, in our case, the event is what brings people together. So examples of these events, Hurricane Katrina was a natural disaster where there was collective trauma. There are wars that we look at to see and study collective trauma. There are collective trauma that happens around terrorism or mass shootings and other kinds of pandemics. When we see outbreaks of Ebola in Africa, right, that is a collective trauma for those communities. But we're actually operating in one of the largest collective traumas that we've seen. So Spanish flu, last time we had something this wide scale, is in occupying sort of the minds of everyone in the country. But beyond that, this is an international collective trauma. So it's much more difficult to manage, right? There isn't one person somewhere that you can go, oh, that person is doing fine, right? None of us are doing fine in the way we thought we were a couple of years ago. Many of us have lost people. Some of us have had to deal with confinement and restriction of our movements, which we're not particularly thrilled with. We're having these difficulties where we're trying to figure out, like, how do you even see people anymore? But like, how do you visit your neighbor? Like, do you go over with a Lysol bottle and a mask on and go, can I please sit on your porch? Like, how does that work? How do you do all those things? So that is the basis of a collective trauma. And one of the reasons we look at it this way is because all collective traumas have sort of manifestations, right? Things that happen that we can all connect with that have experienced it, whether we are on sort of the worst end or whether we're fairly protected and isolated. Along the entire way, there are common threads and common occurrences that we have experienced together. Every time I click this, it like takes a second. So one of the things that we look at when we're looking at discussing what this collective trauma has done and what we need to do to sort of help ourselves connect is we sort of look at the change, right? What things have changed so that we can see what we're responding to. So one of the challenges that we run into is quick adjustment, right? So our state here in Michigan, we were shut down within 12 hours, right? I remember when we got notice that hospitals and medical centers and all of those things were going on lockdown, that happened at midnight. And the announcement was made at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then everything was shut down. So we had loved ones that were doing medical visits. Yeah, it does. It does. There's a chat that just come up that says COVID-19 sure brings out the good guys and the bad guys. And to an extent it does, because we're looking at those adjustments, right? So your good guys are people that we think are better able to manage those adjustments. Right? So all of these things that change, some people step up to help, some people step up to sort of work through these things or try to handle it on their own and support others. But then there are people that don't do that so well. And some of those start to look like those bad guys, where they're not really being helpful. There's a lot of complaining happening, and there's a lot of frustration. And that's to be expected, right? Not everybody is super well equipped to handle something like this. And so when we're looking out into the world, it absolutely looks like this huge division between people who've got it figured out and are trying to be helpful and people who look like they're engaging in self-sabotage or collective sabotage in some ways. Plus, one of the challenges to the stressfulness, right? Because the next thing here is this is sort of an ongoing stressful and limiting situation. Right? A collective trauma in some way takes all those things into account. It goes for a period of time, and we don't even know when this one is over. No clue. We'll get there. We think that maybe once vaccinations happen, we'll get there, but your guess is as good as mine at this point. So we don't even have an end, right? This isn't like a hurricane, like it came down, it destroyed our house, and then we can rebuild. Like our house is currently still being destroyed. Like it's not done. So it's difficult to start processing while you're in the middle of it. But that's what we have to do. But when we're looking at these stressful situations, people that don't manage stress as well or having much more difficulty adjusting tend to be those people that we look at and go, you're not handling this well. There's just something wrong going on here. and limiting, right? So this is limiting. There are things that we can't do. There are things that even if we wanted to do them, we can't do. And there are things that we desperately want to do that we're not allowed to do. And that limits our options, right? If it was as easy as just going over and hanging out with your neighbor, well, maybe we'd all know our neighbors better. But as I think somebody's mentioned here in the chat, the neighbor isn't even letting you in the house, right? They've known you for like 30 years. You've been next door neighbors. And you're not even allowed inside because people are very concerned about what's going on. And whether you feel that that concern is justifiable or not justifiable, you know, it's still their concern. And one, this is an unpredictable situation. So we really don't know what direction things are going. We have a sense, right? We're sort of riding the wave at this point. We're holding on, we're riding the wave, we're seeing where we go. But we don't really have the opportunity to say, okay, here are the steps, this is the path, because the path changes. Right? We've had elections in the middle of this path. We've had medical rollouts in the middle of this path. Some of them have gone as expected. Some of them have not. We have all kinds of things that are happening right now that influence how this is going to look. Right? We have some counties in Michigan that have vaccine shortages because, you know, they don't have very high numbers of cases right now. So they rerouted them. Right? So there are all kinds of things that we don't have control over. And if that's our county and we didn't get the vaccine that we expected, well, that's definitely unpredictable. And that changes what happens for the people that live around us. In addition, a lot of these things feel irrational. They feel inconsistent. They feel like they don't make sense. And so we're constantly walking through our days trying to plan our futures in a world that doesn't quite feel solid and feels quite frankly silly in some ways. Right? And everyone's going to feel those things at different places. So some people are going to feel that it's very silly that their neighbor won't engage with them. Other people are going to think it's very silly that their children and grandchildren are still learning virtually at home. Others are going to feel that it's very nonsensical that the children are going back to schools, right? So there's no one right way to feel when you're in this circumstance, right? Everybody is having different responses and different reactions to exactly the same things, but with a different lens, right? Everybody is coming at it and approaching it from a different perspective. So we come to different conclusions. And in addition, the entire community is going through this at the same time. The whole thing, right? There isn't anyone out there that is somehow isolated from this. Everyone is involved. Everyone is somehow participating in these adjustments, whether it is for neighbors or for their homes or for schools or for friends, or, you know, their events have shut down, right? Those are the way, yeah, right. These are the ways that this all functions. And now we're going through this vaccination stage, and we have concerns around those too, right? So first of all, we have distribution of vaccines is moving, and we've had some challenges. The vaccines themselves are fairly new. There's a comment here saying we're not really sure how the vaccines are going to work. And yeah, to an extent, that's absolutely true, right? Like, we don't have 10 years of clinical trials for these vaccines. We're trusting that the scientists are getting it right. And that's nerve-wracking for some people, right? That's very nerve-wracking. You know, so I can appreciate on one hand some people saying, well, these wouldn't be approved even for use now if they weren't going to be helpful and safe and all those things, because that's the way the FDA works. But I also completely hear the other side, which is saying, well, yes, but this is the quickest vaccine turnaround we've ever had. And we don't know what the outcome of that is. And we're telling people that are more vulnerable to go get these vaccines first. So they're going to be the first ones that are affected by these side effects or by these long-term consequences if it turns out they exist. So when we think about it and go, well, that's ridiculous, is it? Right? Like, we're all looking at different aspects of this process with different concerns. While some people are in one boat, some are in the other. And are they wrong? No. Right? Whether you're looking at this going, oh, probably the government's fine and they've figured this out and the FDA's done their work and they're doing it all and they're going to be okay and we're all going to be fine. Are there people that have legitimate reason to be in that boat? Yeah, sure. That's a legitimate, logical thing to think. But we got another other boat over here who's saying, this kind of feels like this is fast and we haven't done this before and it kind of feels like they're testing this out on us. Is there a legitimate reason that you might feel that way? Yeah, sure. Can both of these people coexist together in a community? Right? These are some of the questions that we run into, because what we tend to see is when we've got two different boats, we run into hostility. Right? Everyone needs to be certain that everyone else understands what's going on in their boat. But it's kind of difficult to see how someone else got in theirs. Right? I know why I'm here, but your boat seems silly. And that's the nature of this kind of collective trauma. It's the nature of it. It's that nonsensical, irrational, like, worry, right? And it's not that your conclusions are wrong or flawed or not based in some fact. It's that the visceral emotional reactions we have to people that reach different conclusions are heightened in a state of trauma, where we're feeling very protective of ourselves, right, and our loved ones. That's what we do in a trauma experience. Somebody that's been through a war or a hurricane or violence, right? We're wired to protect ourselves when we're going through something like that or when we see something like that. And so we are inspired to grab people that are in the same boat and protect each other. And that's fantastic, but this is happening to an entire community. An entire community. And a whole country comprised of whole states and dozens of counties in each state and dozens of communities in each county. And so now we're in a circumstance where how is it possible that every single person would be in the same boat? Right? We're not. So now we're trying to figure out how to navigate through that with our very strong beliefs about how to protect ourselves, while there are people in other places in this very same community that are trying to protect themselves differently. And it's stressful. It's stressful for people. And it makes it less likely for us to seek outside support. Right? So there's two phenomenons really at work here. One, it's sort of an us versus them phenomenon, right? People that see it my way versus people that have a different view. I don't want to reach out to people that have a different view because they might help me wrong. And I know that's a silly way of saying it, but in a nutshell, that's what we're worried about, right? Oh, I'm here falling out of an airplane. Oh, maybe they're going to give me a rock instead of a parachute, right? Because their structure of what they think is going on is not the same as mine, and they won't understand. The other one is the sort of we are all drowning phenomenon. And this is when everyone, right? Your perception is that everyone is going through this. And so you don't want to put your burden on someone else for fear that it may cause them to sink faster, right? So in COVID, what we're seeing is we're seeing people that are parts of family units. And we're seeing people that are part of what would otherwise be very tightly knit organizations isolating because they don't want their problems, their stresses, their financial situations, their medical worries. They don't want any of those things dragging down the family members or the organization members or the friends that they think are also in this spot, right? Because it's sort of the, put on your own air before you give it to someone else. And we worry. We worry that we're taking away their air, right? We worry that we're out in the middle of a lake and we're grabbing onto somebody to help us float, and that's going to cause that person to sink. So we tend to back and we tend to isolate more than we otherwise would, which in this situation is less helpful because one of the challenges to this particular trauma is the isolation in the first place. So the less we connect with others for support, the more difficult that experience actually is for us. Which is why the very first topic that we want to look at really is staying community connected. And you guys are already doing that to an extent because you're here, right? So look, it's down here. I don't know if you can see. I don't think you can. Oh, yeah, you can. Look, you can see it. Oh, my mouse. Attend virtual meetings locally or not locally. There's some going on now that you can visit across the country and even further. But our first step here is we want to avoid feeling like we're an island, right? We want to avoid feeling like we're all by ourselves and we're the only ones that are going through this and we're the only ones that are doing it. So we want to reach out to our communities. And we start with our communities because many of us are already at least talking to family members in some way, if we have family members that we're talking to before this. Some of us have lost family members that we used to talk to, so that's not always our primary option. Some of us are feeling overwhelmed to talk with our family about some of these things, but in our community, we're sort of close-knit. We're all in the same general area. We feel a little bit more connected. Your neighbor might have more in common with your current situation than a family member that lives farther away. Plus, you have to do things like eat food and pay your bills and all those kinds of things in your community anyway. So we start here. So the first thing we want to look at if we're trying to avoid feeling like an island is how can we maintain group connections through new means. So what that is looking at is, what did I used to do? What groups did I used to participate in? What things or activities did I used to do? And is there a way that I can do those things now, even if it looks different? So an example of this that someone brought to me is that they used to attend a yoga class, right? A local yoga class. And they don't do that anymore because everything's closed, right? They're not technically a gym and they can't have a class with the restrictions that are in place. So they've been doing yoga by phone, where their group has gotten together and done like a group phone call for 20 or 30 minutes and done part of their lesson that they do each week just together over the phone. Another one is that I have an acquaintance that I've talked to who has an exercise group. Used to get together with friends to do some exercises just to maintain sort of body functioning. Originally, they got together because they were trying to keep themselves healthy to avoid some of the joint pain that was associated with some arthritis that one of them had. And so they were trying to keep active and limber and keep moving around. And they couldn't do that anymore because they couldn't have that many people from different households inside. So they first, of course, when it was warm out, they first ended up doing this in somebody's driveway. They moved all the cars out of the driveway and had 5 of them in let the dice form where, you know, in the corners and one in the middle. They were doing their exercises there. And when that didn't work anymore because it started getting snowy, they had one of their neighbors open up the garage and get big fans, like got heat fans that they rigged to sort of warm it up so that they could practice in smaller groups. Yeah. Okay. So there's a comment coming in right now talking about how a friend is dragging this individual out for dog walks. Yeah. Right. So this is another way. This is a way to maintain your community connections through a new means. This actually speaks not only to this one, but to the last one here, visit open air spaces like parks and outdoor areas, right? Because what you're doing is, one, you have another person there. So we're staying connected, right? Because as humans, we need connection, right? We do. We are social creatures. We don't do well in complete isolation. We have to be some way in groups. So what we're trying to do when we see something like this is not lose those connections. And I think this is a great idea. Go find a friend that has a dog and have them drag you out to walks with this dog, because one, you're maintaining that friend group, but two, you are getting that open air space. That's so important. It's so important. One of the things that we see is people that are able to get out and move around and spend some time outside actually report higher well-being than people that are staying indoors to try and do these activities. Because there is something about the sunshine that that really connects and invigorates many people. In addition, it can also help you with the next one that I'm looking at here, which is keep informed of your local goings-on. Goings-on is a word phrase that I got in my family. My mother used to tell me, I don't know all the goings-on of you people. Of course, she's talking about, you know, back when I was a teenager, me and my friends, you people as a reference to all teenagers, because, you know, I had the master schedule when I was 15 to hand it to you. But keep up with your local goings-on. So can you walk the dog maybe past a building? Can you go through downtown and see if there's anything up on the doors, or take a look and see what's open, see what businesses have come back online, see what hours look like, just so that you can be more connected and more informed and feel like you know what's going on. One of the challenges we run into is we feel like we're just out of the loop, right? We feel like we don't know. We feel disconnected. And when we're feeling disconnected, we invest less in our community and we participate less in our community. And both of those things make it very difficult to continue to walk through something like this. So keep informed about local goings-on. And if that means you're not, right, maybe you don't have a friend with a dog that is walking around with you, make a phone call, right? Call up, you know, a local group or a local business that you're interested in and ask them what they have going on. Hey, what are you guys doing, right? Call up, you know, the school if you're curious. Hey, what are the plans? Have you guys gone? Are you still virtual? What's happening? Just so that you know. Now, I have had people tell me that there is such a thing as being too informed. And that may be true. So if you are one of those people that need to know everything, I'm going to encourage you to breathe, because there's so many things changing that it's very difficult to know all of the things right now. It's going to take all of your time. And I appreciate that you want to know, but sometimes we can't. And it's hard. But you'd be on the phone forever if you're trying to figure out all of the organizations all of the time. The other thing that I want to encourage is if you have internet connectivity and or you're watching the news, right? And you are just watching sort of this news channel, and you're not getting a good feeling from it, or it's not helping, or it's causing you to feel worried, you can turn off the news. Right? You can turn it off. You don't want to consume so much that it feels overwhelming to you. Right? The equivalent on the internet right now is people that go through their social media, right? But the social media posts are all very upsetting, or they're scrolling news, and the news is very upsetting. Right? We call that doom scrolling. Right? We're going to continue to scroll through the news sections, or through our social media, or through whatever it is that we're looking at, just to see how bad it is. Right? That's not what we mean when we're saying keep informed of your local goings-on. Right? Your local goings-on are, you know, the mayor's dog was outside sniffing the Christmas trees on the strip the other day, and there was a picture posted somewhere about it. You know, locals goings-on are Taco Tuesdays are on at Peppers. Like, that's, dude, locals goings-on. Fantasticness. Like, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, wanting to have information about, knowing what's happening in your community. Next is volunteering. So one of the things that we want to look at is, what can I do to help people that maybe are having a harder time with this than I am, right? Because one, doing something productive gives us a sense of well-being and a sense of accomplishment. And two, you're alleviating difficulty, right? There are people that need some help, and you are available. Why not try? So some of the things that I suggest here are things like garden planting, right? Flower planting. We're getting into the time where we're expecting, my tulips aren't up yet. So I don't think if your tulips are up, I need to know, because mine usually talk to me and they're not coming yet. So when the tulips come, I usually look around and go, okay, well, what else needs planting, right? Some of the local businesses, they aren't going to have the money this year to do the beautification that they normally would. Give them a call. See if you can volunteer some time to help them plant some flower beds. Right? See if you have a neighbor who maybe isn't doing as well that you could plant with. See if there are any deliveries that need to be done. Right? So there are food banks, right? Aid for Milan is working with food gatherers right now, and do they have any delivering that might need to be done? Right? Things that don't require a lot of necessarily person-to-person contact, but that can be done in steps or appropriately socially distanced. And those are just some, ideas of things that have been brought to me. I'm sure there are other ones as well. I don't know everything that there is to do. You could also call your local senior center and see if they need anything. You can certainly do that too. Because they are a really, really great place to keep informed. And the other thing, they're doing virtual, their number's right here. It popped up, 734-508-6229, right? If you have any questions, or you want to volunteer, or see if there's something that you can do, whether that's, sending in some paper towels, or collecting Campbell's soup cans, whatever it is that they might need, give yourself a goal, give yourself something that you're working towards, and wonderful if that can be working towards helping your community. In addition, the Senior Center also is doing this virtual meetings, attend locally, right? They've got a weekly gathering that they do for coffee, and they have things like this where I can come and talk with you and you can see at least one face. And there are a lot of other places that are doing these kinds of gatherings too. So, City Hall has done a couple of these. There are some school boards that have done some of these gathering get-togethers, and you don't have to have someone in the school to go. You can just go and see what's happening. In addition, There are local businesses that are doing sort of some of these short gatherings. So if you contact them and say, hey, are you guys doing anything virtual if you haven't seen, then they can either let you know when their next virtual event might be, or they can tell you, what would be necessary. So if you're not looking to do, coffee chat on Mondays, then, here at the senior center, then you can look and do, maybe something with the city or the township. And we got 2 counties, right? So like we got Washtenaw County and Monroe County. Like we're stars. We call and say, hey, I'm from Milan, and everyone will listen. They all care what we say. They don't ask us what half of the state, what half of the city you're in when you call and ask. They just talk to you. That's just the way it works. But they can give you all of the information if you need it. And of course, I'm sure that if there's anything specific you're looking for, you can get some support at the senior center. Tell Jody I made you call. He'll find it. Finally, I'm wondering if there are any questions or comments or thoughts or concerns that you guys had about some of the changes that you've gone through or some of the difficulties that you've had sort of maintaining that attachment to your communities during this time. Because I've run into so many different people that have come at this from so many different angles. And I want to make sure that as we're moving forward, and we're sort of getting into what feels like the home stretch, we're all hitting the ground in a good place. So I'm looking at the chat right now to see if there's anything that's coming up in particular. If not, oh yes, books and crafts. Okay, so this is fantastic. All right, so there are comments coming through the chat right now about spending time with books and getting crafting done. I love this as an opportunity. So one of the challenges that we run into is the thought that we need to keep going and going and going and going. Sometimes we just can't do that, right? This is a very difficult experience. Right? It's difficult on different levels, for different reasons, for different people. So maybe one of us is having physical difficulties with this, right? The restrictions mean that our bodies aren't operating quite the way we'd like. We have some health concerns that are going on. We're trying to be careful because, we don't want to get involved in this. Catching this would not be fun for us. It would be pretty dangerous. So we're trying to be cautious, maybe overly so, but we're staying home. We're doing everything that we've been asked to do, but it hurts, right? Our bodies are fighting with us. We're not really in the best place. There are still things that we can do, right? We can stay active inside our homes. Right? If we're doing crafts, I love crafts because crafts can be interactive. So what are we making crafts for? Right? Are we putting together crafts for ourselves to put up in our homes and remind us of this time period? Are we putting together something that we want to donate? Are we making quilts? Right? I've run into at least one person who started quilting during this experience and has been donating quilts for the last year. Now, you don't generate a ton of quilts in that amount of time, but it's a process and it's a passion, and this person loves doing it, but also can't just keep quilting for no reason, because then your house is full of quilts and people think you're strange, or maybe they know you're strange. I don't know. I don't know you. I don't know any of you, but that's the issue. Like I'm kind of the same way. I have hobbies, but if I keep doing them without sending things outside of my home, they pile up. My husband is certain that I'm going to end up being some sort of crazy, crafty cat lady. And I'm just going to accumulate like little artsy things that I'm going to work on and cats. And he laughs at this idea, but he's certain it's going to happen someday. So if you're a crafter and you're interested in doing those kinds of things, find out if there's anything you can do, right? The local schools would love if you wanted to participate in doing some sort of project with them, right? Teachers are making bulletin boards. They would die if someone would help them put bulletin boards together because they're working like 3 jobs right now. Like there's all kinds of things that you could volunteer to do in the community if you are an artsy, craftsy person and wanted to put some energy in that direction. But also, books are amazing. Sometimes we need to settle ourselves down, gather our energy, and just work on making it through, right? Just work on taking our next steps and being okay where we are and figuring out where we want to reach and step next. Right? You don't have to solve all the problems of your household in one day. You don't have to come up with all of the solutions for how you're going to recover from this or reconnect to your community in a day, right? It took us a year to get to this place, right? The community's not even back open yet. We're working on it, one step at a time, darn tootin'. We're working on it, but we're still getting there, right? And as the community starts to reopen and some of these things become more available, that gives us really great opportunity, if we feel comfortable, to take a step out and do some of those things. If we feel less comfortable or we are at health risk or there are other reasons why we shouldn't be engaging in the same way, that's perfectly fine. Then we go back, let's see if I can figure out the go back button. Yes. We go back and we look at something else, right? Let's keep ourselves informed instead. Let's try and see if we can get to open air parks, right? That doesn't mean we need to walk around, right? That might mean we have to have a friend help us get there and sit on a bench for a little while and just breathe some fresh air, right? You don't have to be chasing these little kids in the park to enjoy it. I'd be in so much trouble. Oh my goodness, my kids look at me and they're like, come on, Mom, let's go down the slide. And I'm like, Mommy doesn't fit on the slide anymore. It's meant for 8-year-olds. Y'all just watch you from here. You're amazing. Have fun. That's good enough for them. Is good enough for me. Y'all don't have to get on the slide. You just have to breathe some air, right? So there are different stages of all of these, you know. Again, it's a common thread. A common thread. You can be all the way on this side where you're 100% like getting into CrossFit because why not, right? Like it's outside, everything's great. I can do it myself. I don't need you. Let's go. Woo! You know, now you're like buying protein powder on Amazon and having equipment delivered that straps weights onto your body so you can go running. Cool beans. You had fun with that. You enjoy the heck out of that. Or maybe you're just working on sitting on your own porch and feeling comfortable in that space, right? Some of us are still getting comfortable with sitting on our porch. And we see the people getting into CrossFit and we go, oh my goodness, what are they doing? What? And they're looking at you doing the same thing. Man, like it's a beautiful day. Why are you sitting on your porch? You can come run around here. Just stay 6 feet behind me, right? So there is a variety of ways. No one way to do any of these things is correct. And what I want people to take away more than anything is doing a little of something is better than doing absolutely nothing, right? There is a sense among people at times that if I can't do it all the way, it isn't always worth doing. And I'm here to tell you that in this circumstance, that's not the case, right? Just because you can't go all the way up to 10 on the scale of things you'd like to do doesn't mean that a 2 doesn't improve your life, right? It doesn't, just because you're not organizing a community garden doesn't mean that, you know, planting some tulip bulbs outside of JR's is like not useful, right? There's a variety. Don't do that without calling them and seeing if you can plant tulip bulbs outside you get me. But the point is, just because you're not all the way up to 100 doesn't mean that those smaller steps aren't valuable. Because as everyone starts to engage in some of these smaller steps, it becomes easier to do the things that are bigger. Let's see. We are back to questions, comments, thoughts, and ideas again. So one more time, I'm going to look and see if there is anything in the chat that I haven't had a chance to answer. I'm scrolling back through it.
I just wanted to say thank you, Beverly. This was so informative, and this was such a great, it was so great. So thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you.